Hi, and welcome back to our final video in the AI and Ethics series. The last video ended with 4 questions. Which AI? For which task? With how much human judgment? And under what conditions? And those aren't rhetorical questions. They're a framework, and that's what this video is about. Now, before we get into it, I want to give a little background to let you know where I'm coming from. For some time now, I've been helping ecological practitioners and environmental organizations figure out how to use AI in ways that are actually matching their values, not in the abstract, but in real practice, in their specific workflows, with their specific teams, and in a sector with a very specific culture that tends towards caution, towards rigor, and we always put the ecosystem first. And what I can tell you is that the framework I'm going to share with you here is not something that I read about. It's something that I built and rebuilt over time in my own work and then working with other practitioners. And if it's useful for you, there are places in the end of this video where you can go deeper into it. And one more thing before we start. I'm not a developer. I don't write code. I did not come to this from a technology background. I came to it from an ecological background. Watershed management, restoration ecology, agroforestry design and implementation. If you've been watching this series and wondering whether any of this is accessible to someone who is not technical, the answer is absolutely yes, and I'm the evidence. Now, why the framework? Well, here's what happens when you just start handing work to AI without thinking about it first. You stop reading the output. It looks confident. It sounds like something you would have written, and you accept it. The research actually has a name for this: automation bias. It's documented across dozens of peer-reviewed studies. AI explanations can actually reinforce unwarranted trust rather than reducing it. The more useful AI seems, the more we have to watch for it. There's also a stakes dimension to this. The higher the stakes of a decision, the more skeptical we need to be about any AI output that feeds into it. Research from the national security context found that people become more cautious as stakes rise. But that caution is not automatic. You have to build it deliberately. So let's get into the framework. What I want is to give you a way to look at any task in your work and ask, where does this actually belong? Now, the framework runs on 2 axes. The horizontal axis is what's easy for computers versus what's difficult for computers. And the vertical axis is what's easy for humans and difficult for humans. And this gives you those 4 quadrants. And each one calls for a different relationship with AI. So let's start in the upper left. These are easy for both. Things like data entry, simple calculations, formatting, file organization. This is really where your starting place is. These are low risk, immediate time savings, and a good way to build confidence with the tools before you bring them into higher stakes work. Then we have the upper right. These are things that are easy for humans but difficult for computers. Think EQ, emotional intelligence, leadership, intuition built from years of field experience, stakeholder relationships, regulatory interpretation that requires context. AI does not fit well here, not because it refuses to try. It will try, but because it lacks the embodied judgment that these tasks require. This stays human. Now we look at the lower left. These are things that are easy for computers but difficult for humans. Think like deep research across large document sets, data synthesis, pattern recognition across thousands of records. This is where real leverage lies. The caveat, though, and it's an important one, is that this quadrant requires you to understand the limitations of what you're working with AI. AI in this quadrant can be a great thought partner, but not an autonomous operator. And now, let's look at the last one, the lower right. These are things that are difficult for both: strategy, creative tasks, innovation, novel problem solving. This is not a quadrant where you want to hand it off. It is, though, where you can collaborate. AI can work on pieces of a thing, drafts, sequence of a complex argument, but you're in the lead. The judgment is yours throughout this quadrant. This framework works well for both individuals and organizations. But if we're talking about organizations specifically, the entry point is slightly different. For organizations, before you can place a task in a quadrant, you need to understand how the work actually flows through your organization. Not how the organization chart describes it, the actual sequence of steps that produces a deliverable. Proposals, reports, field data process, outreach, grant applications. Each of these is a workflow. Each workflow breaks down in individual steps. And it's at that step level that the quadrant question becomes even more actionable. One honest caution here: if your organization already has a chaotic system or unclear processes, adding AI to them will not help. It will actually amplify that disorder. The diagnostic work, understanding that workflow before integrating AI, isn't really optional. It is the foundation. So knowing where the framework applies is one thing. Knowing where AI actually breaks is what keeps you from learning the lessons the hard way. I want to be direct about where AI fails, because if you do not know the failure modes going in, then you'll discover them in a deliverable that's already gone out. Let's talk about the first one: hallucination. Hallucination is real, and it is not consistent. The Stanford HIA 2026 AI Index tracked hallucination rates across the major models on a new accuracy benchmark. The range was 22% to 94%. That same model that scores nearly 98% accuracy under normal conditions dropped to 64% under a different testing configuration. The implication is not that you should not use AI. It is that you need to know which quadrant you are in. Hallucination risk is highest in specific territory: novel factual claims, legal interpretation, citation retrieval. In one benchmark study, citation retrieval failed between 48 and 98% of the time across multi-reference queries. The practical rule: anything that would go into a permit application, a regulatory comment, a legal document, or a published report gets verified against a primary source. Always, no exceptions, based on how confident the output sounds. Now let's get into failure mode 2, the automation bias. Automation bias is quieter and may be more dangerous than hallucination because it happens inside you rather than the output. A review of 35 peer-reviewed studies found that AI explanations sometimes reinforced unwarranted trust rather than prompting critical evaluation. Complex explanations increased cognitive load. Increased decision difficulty made people more likely to defer to the machine rather than engage harder. The diagnostic question is simple: are you reading the output or are you accepting it? There's a difference. Reading means you're evaluating it against what you know, checking for gaps, flagging anything that does not match your field experience. Accepting means you scanned it and moved on. Research also found that the higher confidence in yourself correlates with more critical thinking when using AI. Higher confidence in AI correlates with less. Keep your own expertise calibrated. It's what makes the human judgment in this system work. Now let's get into failure mode 3. Being in the loop is not the same as being in control. There's a body of research on human oversight of AI systems that documents a specific finding. Humans provided correct oversight only about half the time. The most common reason was not incompetence. It was the motivation to comply with organizational goals rather than to actually evaluate what the AI was doing. This one's worth sitting with. The structure that's supposed to protect you, a human in the loop, fails when the human is going through the motions. Oversight requires actual engagement, not just presence, engagement. These 3 failure modes are not arguments against using AI. They're the reason the framework exists. They tell you where to slow down, where to verify, and where to keep the judgment with you rather than delegate. Now, here's what this actually looks like when you apply this, not in theory, but in practice. Before I get into my own practice, I wanted to name something that the research around meaningful work keeps coming back to. The question in this framework is not just, can AI do this task? It is, does doing this task matter to you? Does it give you something back? Research from Notre Dame Center for Ethics and the Common Good argues that meaningful work is not just economically valuable. It's part of how we maintain identity, connection, a sense of place in the work that we do. If AI replaces you, not just the labor, but the experience embedded in the labor, something real is lost. The framework's allocation question has a values layer underneath it. Even where AI could technically handle something, you're allowed to keep it. Not because you're being inefficient, but because it matters to you. So I wanted to be specific with you about how I actually use this, because I think generic version of this story is not very useful. I run my practice as an AI-first operation. That means AI is integrated in how I work at the system level, not just a tool I pick up when I need it. I've built out context with Claude. That's my preferred tool, although you can do that with the other tools, so that it understands multiple layers of the work I do and can pull that context in automatically. I have a daily briefing that surfaces what I need to know for the day: proposal drafting, content scheduling, outreach drafts, admin synthesis. These are things that happen with AI assistants, and they happen faster and at a lower cost than they would have 2 or 3 years ago. The time savings are real. For me, they're in the double digits per week. Time that used to go to administrative overhead now goes to design work, direct engagement with the people I work with. The thought partnership piece is where it gets even more interesting. I use AI the way you might use a really well-read colleague who never gets tired of being asked to look at something from a different angle. If I have several ideas that I'm trying to bring together but I can't quite figure out how to map it, I'll use it to help me structure them. If I want to see whether there's academic research and literature behind something that I'm pretty sure is true, I'll have it pull the document so I can verify it. And if I'm stuck on how to approach something, I'll use it to brainstorm options and then find the one that resonates. But I write in my own voice. Everything that goes out under my name, I finalize. I'm not using AI to generate my creative work. I'm using it to think through my creative work better while I write it. And what I've kept all mine is the field judgment, the design work, the direct relationships. As many of you know, every restoration project is different enough that handing off design thinking is not something I would do even if I could. And I find that having more time freed up from the admin work means I have more time and more capacity for the parts that I actually love. And none of this requires a technical background. I didn't learn to code. I learned to use the tools deliberately. That distinction matters. How you allocate your work is one layer of intentional use. Which AI you give that work to is another. I'm not going to tell you which tool to use. What I will tell you is that choosing is not neutral, and the information to make an informed choice is available to you. The Stanford Foundation Model Transparency Index tracked major AI providers in 2025. The industry average transparency score dropped from 58 out of 100 in 2024 to 40 out of 100 in 2025. There's real variation in that too. Some labs have been improving or holding steadies. Others have moved in the opposite direction. The Future of Life Institute rated 8 major AI companies on safety in late 2025. The top 3 scored in the C+ to C range. The rest scored lower. No company scored above a D on the existential safety measure. The honest counterweight is that even the higher-rated companies have walked back commitments they made publicly. This is not a clean story, and there is no perfect provider. What exists is real variation, imperfect information, and your own judgment about what matters to you. Published model cards, third-party audits, and transparency reports exist. They are the same kind of signal you already use in procurement decisions across the rest of your work. Applying the same values-informed lens here is not asking you to become an AI policy expert. It's asking you to be the practitioner you already are. 3 videos, 1 framework, and a proof of concept. Here's what you actually have now. In video 1, I said something that I want to come back to now. In a field moving this fast, the only durable skill is intentional judgment, because no specific statistic stays true for long. That is what you've built across these 4 videos. You know what the individual footprint looks like and how to keep it in proportion. You know the structural story, where the real costs concentrate and why practitioners belong in that conversation. You know that the use or not decision has pretty much already been made for most of us, and the real question is, do we use it intentionally or do we just drift along? And now you have a framework, not a set of rules, a decision-making tool that you can pick up on any given Tuesday and ask, where does this task belong? What does AI actually do well here, and what do I need to keep? Intentional judgment is not a philosophy, it's a practice, and it is one that fits this work well. 2 more things I'd like to share as we bring this to a close. One is that I built what I've described to you because I needed it in my own work. And I've spent some time now helping other ecological practitioners, environmental organizations, build their own versions of it, tailored to their specific sector, their specific team, their specific culture. What I've learned is that the gap between knowing the framework and implementing it is real. And it's not a knowledge gap. It's a capacity gap and a translation gap. Knowing what the quadrants are and knowing how to apply them to a wetland delineation workflow or a grant reporting process or a field data pipeline are two different things. And that's where the work actually is. The second thing is, if you're an individual practitioner who wants to go deeper with intentional AI use and who wants to help shape what this looks like for this sector, there's a community of practice forming for this exact purpose. People doing ecological and environmental work who are figuring this out together. The link's going to be in the description. And if you're representing an organization that wants hands-on help with AI adoption strategy, team education, AI policy, workflow audits, or building an AI operating system for your operations, that is what the work of AI in ecology does. That link will also be in the description. Either way, thank you all for watching. And please be engaged with us at whatever level you do, because getting this right in this field is very important. Thanks.